Good evening, everyone. Indiana's own Dana Black turned left. Welcome to the show. As you can see, I'm excited. I have another special guest tonight. But first, I want to give a shout out to RadioNext.tv and letting these guys know that they're here doing all kind of radio shows, community action shows all the time. It's all community all the time. So if you're not tuned in to Radio Next, you need to download the TuneIn app, and that's where you'll be able to find RadioNext.tv, because it's all community all the time. They do a veteran show. They do something for our seniors. So be sure you check out what HB is working on, because he is trying to bring you quality information. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So for the last couple of weeks, I have been telling you guys how excited I was that we have with us the Indiana Democratic Party Chairman, John Zody. This is a huge gift for us because, you know what, there are a lot of people who think that the party is full of folks who are untouchable. Well, here he is. He's sitting right here next to me, right here, and he is going to chat with us, and he's going to tell us about what the direction of the party is going in and some of the initiatives that he has in place. He was just re-elected, I want to say about a month ago, right?
That's right.
So he got a second term, and one of his first actions of second term was help create 2 new deputy chair spots, which yours truly has one of. So we're truly excited, sir. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dana. Great to be on.
Oh, I'm loving it. So, you know, John, a lot of people have a tendency to think that, you know, once you get kind of high up in the party, that you're kind of untouchable and, you know, please stay back. Don't come near me. Can you share with the people a little bit about who you are and where you come from?
Well, I certainly share the philosophy that we should all be working together in the same direction, and I keep an open door policy. I've been involved in politics. This is my 20th year in
20 years.
Politics. I started in college when I was 20. I just turned 40.
You're still a youngin'.
About 3 weeks ago. So
Happy birthday.
A couple milestones here. But got involved as an intern at IU down in Bloomington. Started out interning for the mayor of Bloomington. That was my first internship there.
Wow.
And from there, just knew I wanted to be involved in politics. Was not political growing up. I was interested in politics. I grew up in Martinsville, so along the...
Wait a second. Let's hold that. You grew up in Martinsville, and you are now a Democrat?
Yeah, there are quite a few Democrats in Martinsville and Morgan County. It's a pretty red county by all accounts, but there are a lot of Democrats there.
Okay.
Actually, there are 2 members of the Democratic National Committee from Indiana, from Martinsville originally. David Fry, who's a great leader in organized labor here in Indiana. He and I both went to Martinsville High School. So, and there are a lot of Democrats there. But I didn't grow up in a political household. Certainly. My grandparents, who were my just very favorite people ever, were involved in the community, and my family, my parents, gave me the flexibility to think independently and just kind of make my own way. And so just grew up wanting to be interested and involved in government and politics, but not really knowing what that meant.
Okay.
And then when I went to IU, I was given the opportunity through the School of Public and Environmental Affairs there, SPIA, as most people know, to develop some opportunities for internships. And so interned with the mayor and kind of went from there and got involved in the party.
That is an incredible story, especially coming from Martinsville, because some of us have, you know, preconceived notions about some of our more rural areas, some of our areas that are a little bit more homogenous. We, on the left, feel like, there's no hope for us in those counties, but you're telling me that they're homegrown Democrats down there that are just looking and itching for a voice.
Sure, and I think one of the important things to note about counties like Morgan, it is tough to get elected as a Democrat countywide in places like Morgan County, but there are Democrats there. There are common threads that bring people together in those counties, and I think when you're looking at statewide elections, getting people out to vote, people who are Democrats out to vote, can make a difference in a statewide election, in a congressional election, in a place outside the county when the county is part of a district or obviously part of a state. Getting people out to vote and getting a good margin out of those counties can really make a big difference. And Martinsville is a great place to grow up, and certainly my mom is still there. And
that's awesome.
I have lots of family. My family's been there since 1830, so we've got deep roots in Morgan County. Yeah.
So you are a Hoosier through and through.
7th generation.
Nothing wrong with that. I love that. Hey, I'm Indiana's own, so you know I love my state.
That's right.
So you married?
I am.
All right, ladies, he's off the market. Sorry. Thought I'd tell you that. So how did you decide to become part of the leadership in the Democrat Party? What was that process like?
Well, I think just becoming a Democrat, I think we all sort of seek to be involved in the community in some way, and you find your best way. And I had an interest in politics and government, but again, sort of developed that interest in working for an elected official, and sort of found myself agreeing with values in the Democratic Party. And so, so when you do that, you just want to have the opportunity to get involved, and what's the best way to be involved. And I was one of my first activities in the party was to get a hay wagon for a parade, and so you just do whatever you're asked to do. I was willing to say, ask me what you are. Tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. And I knew how to get a hay wagon for a parade on the 4th of July.
Well, there you go.
That was one of my activities, and just sort of just stayed in the party and did what I was asked to do, and realized that it was a place that made me feel like I was giving something back. As I was brought up to do, just in a political way.
Okay. And so have you ever ran for a public office yourself?
I have not. I have been on the ballot as a state convention delegate. I have thought about running for office and considered it, but certain circumstances didn't allow for it at the time, and I've been happy to help others get elected.
So so the job for state party chair came open.
Right.
You rolled up your sleeves, you'd done some of the dirty work, and then you it created those positive relationships. And that opening came up, and you said, I want to, did somebody approach you, or did you say, I want to do this?
I expressed interest. I'd been a vice chair of the Monroe County Democratic Party when I went to school. I obviously lived in Bloomington and been involved in politics with the Monroe County Democratic Party. Then I moved up to Indianapolis. Then I moved back to Bloomington and got back involved in the Monroe County Party. So I was a local county vice chair. Then I was a district officer. I was secretary of the 9th District for a couple of years. And when this position became available, I was working on President Obama's re-election campaign in Chicago. And understood that my predecessor, Dan Parker, was not running again, and expressed some interest, and some others expressed interest in that back, and one thing led to another, and I was elected in March of 2013. And then, of course, as you mentioned, I was just re-elected again. This about a month ago.
That's a good thing, because the party needs a little consistency. I mean, we can always turn over everything right away, but you know what? Establishing a little consistency probably is not a bad thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So 2016, my man, it was
tough.
It was a tough year.
Tough one. Yeah.
It was a tough year. I am not one to continue to rehash that, but can we maybe talk about some of the areas that we identified? I know that you did a statewide tour. Can you explain some of the things that you identified as areas that we needed to improve on based on the assessment from the election and some of your visits around the county?
Sure, and I think a good place to start here, because I know there are a lot of people watching on Facebook Live and a lot of people listening, is that a lot of people did a lot of good work last year, and I don't want anyone to come away from the election. We Democratic candidates, for the most part, were not successful. There were a lot of factors there, but people did good work. People worked in the same direction. People gave their time, gave their money, and just a lot of people put everything they had into the election. So I think it's important to recognize the good work that was done. Our candidates here in Indiana outperformed the top of the ticket, the national ticket, by more than 300,000 votes.
Wow.
And so there were a lot of good things here in Marion County. There was electoral success, and at the local level, and even at the regional level, there was success. Unfortunately, at the statewide level, there wasn't, and so we hate that. But we looked at what our strengths were there, the good work that was done, and then looking ahead. Every election is different, and so 2018 is not going to be like 2016 because it's a midterm election year, and there are going to be different candidates and different issues. But you look at you boil it back down to the basics and say, how was our data? How was our operation? How was our message? And so we look at all of those things, and you can always improve your data. You can always improve how you're talking to voters. I think a lot of people realize that a lot of unlikely voters voted last year that we didn't have on the radar. And a lot of people think that may have been what happened with some polling data that came back. And so we have some unlikely voters who are now on the radar. And so we look at that. That'll make a difference with data. And with message, we've got to make sure that as Democrats, we're holding true to our values. But I think moving forward, we will always talk about the economy as our first message to folks, and that was working. I have to always compliment John Gregg, who had a message that was working last year. John talked about wages. He talked about early childhood education. He talked about infrastructure, and he talked about protecting everyone equally under the law. And those things are still very much Democratic values and didn't change after the November election. What I think we have to do is drill down on some of those things like the economy and wages, because our current leadership in the State House is not talking about wage growth. No. They aren't. They're talking about an unemployment rate that's low, but we have to look at how many jobs people are working that makes that unemployment rate low and talk about
what they're
wages.
Getting paid. Yeah,
exactly, and wage growth. And so those issues, we have to look at all those things that didn't change from last November, but look at how we can expand upon those and talk about them to different people in perhaps different ways, but always get back to the economy. Every issue, so many issues are about the economy at the end of the day here in Indiana. So those are some things that we're looking at doing differently. We're looking at our outreach, obviously, for the party and how we can do some things different there, and we are. And just looking at how we can build the party, how we can build our coalition to elect Democrats statewide.
Okay, so I want to stick real quick with just the economy at present. So when most people hear the economy, it's an abstract word. Mm-hmm. They don't not everyone understands the intricacies that go into what the economy is. Right. Explain, if you can, and explain the direction we are trying to move the economy, because in Indiana, and especially in the race that I ran in, I did not talk about taxes other than how you're spending them. Right. So explain for us, how the state party looks at economics and the economy.
Sure. Well, we look at I think we start with the issue of fairness and making sure that people have the opportunities to raise a family, have a good quality of life here in Indiana. And I think the economy becomes very much less abstract when you can see it on the ground, when you can see our roads needing help, when you can see our schools needing help, when you can see people struggling. When you see people struggling, you say, okay, why is that person struggling and what can we do about it? And it really is looking at that person's economic security, because people want security. And they want to be paid attention to. And I think that, especially in our rural areas, we've seen some people be ignored by our current leadership at the State House that have majorities, and we are trying to change that. But looking at the economy from the standpoint of a family, a Hoosier family, we are too low in the rankings for per capita income.
Yes, we are, and we're steadily dropping.
Right, and we are too low in areas that really make a difference. If a person is working 2 or 3 jobs, are their kids, where are their kids if they're not in school? Are they in daycare? Can they afford daycare? Do they have access to daycare? If a person's working 2 or 3 jobs, do they have access to health care? Do their kids have access to health care? If a person's working 2 or 3 jobs and not making what they should, can they not afford to drive on those roads? What is their economic security situation? Because without that economic security, people
they feel angst.
Yeah, they do. They feel very anxious. Yeah. And so we have to make sure, as the Democratic Party, that we are looking at an economy that can lift up people's ability to access a good quality of life. And that really does start with jobs and good wages and a wage that people deserve. In the last couple of years here in Indiana, we've seen the legislative majorities, for instance, repeal a law known as the prevailing wage law, which is a very important issue. And with our friends in organized labor, they repealed that law, which to me is a license for people. Governor Pence at that time signed a license for people to make less in this state. That means that you have the ability to be paid less than the wages you have should qualify you to make a higher wage. And they repealed that law. And so things like that are not ways to focus on wage growth. It's not helping people. It's a veiled attempt, people will say, to save money, but in fact you are paying people less, and then that's less money that goes back into the economy.
Absolutely, especially the right to work bill.
Exactly.
That's another one that was a hot topic, and that was just essentially a way to decentralize workers, right? So the one thing about the union is that when they would go in and speak collectively, and they would have one voice, and they were able to leverage that power of a collective voice. Once we took that away, that really it helped to drive wages down.
Well, it's certainly those things all snowball and sort of create an atmosphere where that's a possibility. And so when you look at the prevailing wage law, that was an issue that really there's so many people that depend on those wages, but also they have the skills that they should be making a wage that they're qualified to make.
Absolutely.
And so that was a license for people to make less. And so really just it comes down to economic security, it comes down to wages, and making sure we're talking to people about those economic issues.
So I'm sitting here right now, right, and I'm watching your eyes. I know you guys are like not feeling you may or may not be feeling the energy. This man is passionate about these subjects because I can see it in his eyes. Where did that passion come from?
Well, like I said, as we pointed out, my family's lived here for going on 200 years, and my mom taught Indiana history. I've been to every county in this state. I care about it. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter that will hopefully live and work in this state when she's older. It just comes from my whole interest in my career has always been to try to see what I can do to help in Indiana. When I worked in Washington, D.C., it was for a member of Congress from Indiana, and I was always kind of with that mind of what is the condition of the place I call home, because I feel like if you're not doing everything you can to take care of home and you go out and do something else, I sort of feel a little emptiness there if I wasn't doing what I thought I could. And so that's coupled with being in this around 20 years and different levels and seeing issues that something strikes a passion in you. For me, I'm a son of an educator. All of my sisters, I have one biological sister and 4 stepsisters, and they're all public school teachers. So early childhood education is an example of something to me that is so important. And that developed during my time working in the State House for Governor O'Bannon and Governor Joe Kernan back in the early part of in the 2000 to 2003 and 4 and 5. And so you just see things over time that you spark your interest. Rural development, rural areas are very important to me because I think often they're overlooked. But also you see some of those challenges in urban areas too. So it's about making the state better and doing what you can.
And that's interesting because you and I are saying the same thing. Before you and I really had created a relationship, a lot of what you're saying right now are the same things that drove me to run for office as well. And a lot of people don't always understand that, no, we're not going to probably be 100% on every issue when it comes to where the Democrat Party sits. Sure. But the prevailing message is, how do we improve the lives of people?
Right.
We have a super majority in our state house, and I know that you're a little bit more polite than I am, and I'm not going to put you in an awkward position. Right. But for example, everyone who's listens to my show knows how I have so much angst, and I'm actually just pretty pissed off about SB 309, which is the solar panel bill, which Senator Hirschman introduced. This was a bill, in my opinion, that really did not take into consideration, right, the lives of Hoosier families and how they can improve. We talked about the economy, how they can cut their utility costs because they make the investment. When they have such a supermajority like that, oh my God, how do we influence and how do we, as a party, start chipping away at some of that?
Sure. Well, I think it's both being proactive and then reactive, and reactive in a way that is responding in substantive ways to legislation that might come up. One issue, I'll pivot for a minute onto voting rights. Voting rights is something the Democratic Party has stood for a long time and continues to do that, continues to fight. I made a statement the other day. Congressman Messer has come up with a new national voter ID bill, which I think is fraught with peril. But voting rights is an issue where our Democrats in the General Assembly and both in the House and Senate are very proactive about offering amendments to bills and saying, look, here are some things that are important to the right to vote that's going to help expand the right to vote, expand access to the ballot. So they're very proactive in doing those things and making sure that our values are put forward in legislation.
Okay.
We are subsequently reactive when there is a bad piece of legislation that's coming down from the supermajorities, as you pointed out. And we are reactive, I would say, in a good way by making sure that we have people at the State House testifying, that we're making sure our legislators have the very best information on why a piece of legislation may not be the best for a voter.
Right.
We have great staff who can help with that, and we have great volunteers around this state, and that's something we're very focused on. And it's not on the front page of the paper every day.
No, it's
we don't
not.
do it to make news, we do it to help voters. And so being proactive and reactive can be positive. When you're reactive, it's also standing with people who stand with us. Okay. So organized labor, and that includes teachers, and making sure that our democratic values are not thrown out just because we are outnumbered at the State House. And our Democrats at the State House do a great job of helping us with that.
So you touched on a little bit about some of the functionality of the state party, and helping to decipher bills, making sure that you galvanize people to show up to the State House. What are some of the other functions that the state party does?
Sure. Well, our very basic function is to elect Democrats to office.
Democrats.
That's right. Elect Democrats. So that's our basic function of the state party, and the district parties help elect people at the congressional level, and then the county parties elect people locally. So we have those different levels, but that takes a lot of work to elect Democrats, and so it's about recruiting. It's about a lot of my job is involved with fundraising, not only to keep the operation solvent at the state party, but making sure that what does that mean? It's not just paying a staff, it's not just keeping the lights on, it's paying a staff that is going to help advance the cause of the Democratic Party through communications, through making sure that candidates have resources they need, through training, and helping be a responsive resource. That's sort of my phrase I use about the role of the state party should be a responsive resource to people. If somebody wants to be involved with the Democratic Party and don't feel that they have an avenue, I need to do my job better and make sure they have an avenue to get involved. And that's, it's being responsive and make sure that people know that we exist, and people like you are helping with that every day, that know that we exist, what our role is, and what does it mean to elect a Democrat in Indiana? What do those folks stand for? And it is even sometimes looking at the candidate, but also what they stand for and their values, because we're seeing some social trends that whether someone wants to be a Democrat, a Republican, or have a party label, people that have been involved and have become passionate about things in the last few months, over the last couple of years, maybe about issues or a candidate. Not necessarily about being involved in the party organization. So we've got to make sure that our values and our candidates are folks that people can get behind and support, and then bring people into the party in different ways. And we're coming up with different ways to get people involved in the party that break away from a little bit of tradition, but also those traditional ways that people have been involved for a long time and many years. We've got great volunteers around the state that have been doing a lot of work for a lot of years, and then we've got brand new people that we want to bring into.
Yeah, that is one thing that I noticed, and I actually, would feel slightly inadequate. Like, I know that I have a passion, but there are folks that have been on the ground for 40 years, working at the township level, at the precinct level, at the ward chair level, engaging people. And it's like, whoa, there's a whole machine here. Yeah. Is there a point where, the DNC and the state party and some of the county parties, where you guys kind of, coordinate efforts?
We do. So the state party and the DNC, when campaign season rolls around, in my opinion, it's always campaign season, but traditionally campaign season rolls around.
It's never an off season. There are no elections this year.
It is not an off year. It's just, it's a non-election year.
Right,
You're always doing things to advance the cause. But the DNC is an active partner with the state party, and that comes from helping us with resources, sharing best practices, and I think that's something that model, I think the state party is also an active partner with county parties and district parties, and so that relationship does exist. I'm a member of the Democratic National Committee, as is our vice chair, Cordelia Lewis-Burks, and 4 other folks here in Indiana. So not only are we represented on the national committee, but it's a matter of an active partnership, but also knowing that I'm always trying to get more attention paid to Indiana.
Of course.
We're not a traditional battleground state, so I'm often raising my hand saying, hey,
we're here.
Look at us. And,
don't fly over us.
And we've been glad that some of our practices here have been shared as best practices. For instance, when we have municipal elections, and that year, last election was 2015 and 2019. So when we have that, we are a state that has all of our municipal elections in one year. And so we were able to share some best practices there with our friends at the national level, and looking at ways you can just exchange information. It's always not about, I need more money. Money's great, but money gets you so far, and then you've got to, what happens next. And so sharing best practices and information is very important, and that's something that we work with the DNC pretty heavily on.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I mean, I didn't do as well as I had hoped to do in fundraising personally. But honestly, if I could have had, instead of $10,000 more dollars, if I had 10 more solid volunteers, I think would have been as helpful, if not more helpful, because then there would have been more voters I could have reached directly.
Sure.
One of the things that, walking my district, because, the guy that sits in my district, he didn't have to do anything. And so one of the things that people liked was that there was a candidate knocking on their door.
Exactly.
And I know when we are galvanized, we send people out to all, corners of our great state. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that we've been hearing lately, especially from the top, is that we don't have a bench. Mm-hmm. Chairman, I don't think we have a bench.
We do have a bench.
Tell me about our bench.
We do have a bench.
I mean, you don't have to name names because, people, because it's still, he's naming names.
I will name names.
Tell me what we're doing as a state party to make sure that, we can't run. Well, I guess we could run John Gregg again if we wanted to, because he's a really good guy and I really liked him, but do we really want to run him a third time? Who do we have in that pipeline for governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and what training and what activities, right, are happening right now so that the people know that we have a pipeline?
Well, we have a couple different ways I'll answer that question. We have a great bench at the municipal level, at the local level, cities, towns, counties. In that municipal year that I talked about, our last election in 2015, we held our ground in electing Democratic mayors across the state, and it wasn't just in urban areas. I always cite 3 mayors specifically, all of whom are under 40. I think one is about to turn 40. All under 30. All under 40 at the time they got elected, and 2 of them are still much under 40, in Republican cities. One held the city, was a Democratic city, and he held that. One beat a Republican incumbent in his city.
Wow.
One won an open race in a Republican city.
Okay.
And so, and they're cities that are smaller, in rural areas across the state, and so those guys are very much part of our bench.
Our bench, okay.
And so people may not know about Mayor A, B, and C. I won't name their names.
Okay, all right.
Because
That's
I
fair.
hope that I don't want to call them out. But
right.
But they're wonderful guys who worked hard, ran campaigns, using data, using just a lot of elbow grease, and went out there and got the job done. One of the things that I want to do more of at the state party is highlighting them. So this summer I'm going to start going out and doing an interview type format with people like those mayors and council members, saying, here's a member of our bench. Please get to know them. Please know about them. You may have not heard of them before, but please get to know them. And because these are great people running their cities. We've got members of the town and city council. We've got one of the members of our state central committee is the clerk treasurer of Churubusco up in Whitley County. Excuse me, my allergies are acting up here, everybody. I'm sure you can sympathize.
We all know it's Indiana.
Yeah, right.
Air quality,
right.
43rd in the nation. We need to work on that.
So a lot of pollen out there. So there is a bench, and so it's a matter of making sure people know about that bench. We've got some great legislators who are younger and are really doing great things at the State House. And we also have a program called the Emerging Leaders Project that some volunteers started about 5 years ago. And that program has seen about 200 people go through it in the last 5 years through the work of those volunteers, and they're partner with the state party. And that's a leadership development training cohort program that we partner with them on each year, and a lot of those folks have run for office. So there is a bench out there. And so one of the challenges with that bench is, what do those folks do next? And we want to keep that pipeline fresh and flowing. That's a great way to put it. Because one of the things we don't want to happen is if that mayor or that council member decides they want to run for state representative or state senator, that we are able to accommodate that in a competitive race. Part of the challenge there is redistricting, which is a whole nother show.
It would be nice to redistrict.
It would.
It would be fantastic.
And so we're working, to advance that cause. But from a practical sense, it can be tough to get those lines the way you need them to elect folks. And so we've got people in that pipeline that will look when the governor's race comes up in 2020, who's going to run for governor, who's going to run for lieutenant governor. There are people out there, and I think there are good people out there.
And so if somebody is interested in the Emerging Leaders Program, they haven't already run for office, or they're still in college, or they're right on the cusp of that emerging leaders age.
Right.
How do they just reach out to the state party and get signed up?
That's the Emerging Leaders Project. There's information on our website there. And if they're still in college, college Democrats are very active in Indiana. Even high school Democrats have become active in Indiana.
Carmel High School has, and I tout them because I've had the opportunity to meet these young men. They're phenomenal. They're actually a part of also the National High School Democrat organization, and they are now helping me. I've reached out to them because I know like Warren Central and Pike High School were interested in starting a club. So I'm like, I'm going to go to the experts, these other high school kids up in Carmel, which, you know what, when you think about it, who would have ever thought of all the places in our state to have a very solid and very well-organized Democrat club in a high school would be Carmel High School in Hamilton County.
It goes back to what we were talking about with Morgan County. Hamilton County, there are a ton of Democrats in Hamilton County, and the Hamilton County Democratic Party is very active. Hillary Clinton won 10 precincts in the city of Carmel.
See, boom.
2016. So things are trending.
Turning purple.
That's right.
Hamilton County starting to get a little purple bruise. So now I heard you mention 3 mayors who sounded like they may have all been males.
That's correct. They are.
Chair, boss, what are we doing to encourage more women to get involved?
Well, we are emerging leaders a number of ways, and you're involved in some of these initiatives too. That's a great question, and I want to point out that that clerk treasurer I mentioned is a female, and so so we need more women mayors. Which, to your point, we need more women to run for office, get elected. There are a lot of things happening with that in the state. We are working to harness that and see how we best move that forward. Our Emerging Leaders Project, we split the classes half men, half women, 20 of each, so we make sure that it's gender balanced there.
Excellent.
So that's one thing. Making sure that that we are letting the groups of women that have become active and have been active in the state for a long time, that we are following their lead on how we recruit and we recruit, we train, and we elect women. In Bloomington, where I live, the Monroe County Democratic Women's Caucus is one example of an organization that started they're going on 15 years ago, but they've been very successful at the local level to do that. So the leaders of that caucus have been involved in discussions that you and I have both been in about how we do that in other counties, perhaps. There's also different training programs that really have come online in the last few months to again, recruit, train, and elect women. There's a Women for Change group that's nonpartisan, but has thousands of members that just happened after the election.
Over 1,500 women have signed up for Women for Change.
It's finding out, it's getting the word out, as I'm so appreciative of you having me on to do this, but it's getting that word out so that people can say, okay, I'm interested in this. Who do you contact? You can contact the state party. We can put you in touch with the people who are working on these things. And what do you want to do? If you don't want to run, do you want to help someone else run and get elected? And so there are lots of different initiatives out there we're working on. There's some great women leaders who, some have been in elected office and are now retired. Some are sure going to run themselves. Some never want to run for office and they just want to help. And so just was in a meeting with that group, and my job is to help facilitate it because we've already got good activity out there happening with lots of women's groups. And so it's just a matter of harnessing that and facilitating it and see what people want to do and what is their best role.
Yeah, because that grabbing them president really fired up some ladies, you know. They just said, what? Grab what?
Yeah.
And so they want to get involved.
That's right.
So the other thing that we have to be very aware of, there are a lot of disenfranchised groups in our state. I mean, when you look at the state in total, African Americans make up about 9%. If I'm not mistaken, the Hispanic community makes up about 7%. How do we would like to think that we can tailor it all be, one message to reach every demographic. We know that can't happen.
Sure.
How does the party, we're the Big Tent.
Right.
A part of the Big Tent is that you're going to have different voices. How do you harness all those different voices and all those different ideas and say, hey, no, come this way?
Well, I think the first thing is recognize that there are different voices, and that's okay. And the way you look at that is, I think, that mutual understanding that, and I'm sorry again, everyone who's watching, my allergies are really active.
Most of my folks that I know who live in Indiana deal with allergies on a daily basis. We're gonna let the man slide because ain't nothing fell out his nose. He's doing a great job. You're doing fine.
Not grossed out, but I think again, it's realizing there are different voices, realizing how those voices make a difference around the state.
Okay.
We don't always, the same message doesn't work everywhere in the state, but it's respecting that. I think when we are the party of big tents, and we don't all agree on everything.
No, we don't.
And I think it starts with understanding that, and then understanding and having a mutual respect for someone else's possible disagreement with you. I have done a lot of work over the years for elected officials, and some votes they take or something they do doesn't always set well with certain people in the party, and it's understanding, hearing people out, and I think that goes a long way to being unified in our common goal of electing Democrats to office. And so, and that also means that when you have a diverse party, what interests do we need to be sensitive to? What do we need to be paying more attention to? And just keeping your ear to the ground and making sure that we are being responsive to as many of those things as we can. And what are our common values, and what are the things that we need to be sensitive to that may affect different populations? And that's just moving together in the very best way possible.
And see, that's fantastic. You guys are hearing this, straight from the state party chair. I have not coaxed him, as you can tell, to say anything that he is not comfortable with saying. He is telling you the focus and the goal of our party. So now, knowing what is available to you, you have the opportunity to either rise up or still continue to moan and groan. And I'm just going to put it out there, moan and groan about what's not happening. Right? I speak personally from my own personal experience and what made me realize I wanted to be a part of the state party apparatus. We were, it was a discussion about Evan Bayh, and the Central Committee was meeting together about that. And I looked around the room and I noticed the lack of diversity in the room. And it wasn't that, folks aren't good people. I know they're good people because you had union leaders in there and you had all the caucus leaderships in there. But even still, it just felt like, wait, there's still something missing. And I felt like I could be a part of that to help with that missing part. And so, and the other thing I want to share is, this is not a joke, this is not a hoax. When I decided to run for office, I was someone who no one knew existed. I had asked a lot of different people around the state, I'm thinking about running, what do you think? Some people were like, girl, boo, you running against Brian Bosma. What are you smoking? And then there were some people who were saying, well, maybe you ought to, try school board. Maybe you ought to try something else. I went to a training down in Greenwood, and it was the first time you and I had an opportunity to chat. And I said, John, my name is Dana Black. I'm interested in running against Brian Bosma. And you folded your arms up and you said, well, I support you and I encourage you to run. Of all the people that I had asked, other than Joe Miller, you were one of those folks that said, well, we don't usually have somebody in that seat. I want you to run. I did not get the inclination at one point that you felt like, as a human being, that I was not capable of running. And people need to understand that. Some people have preconceived notions about what the state party is. And that's why it was important for me to bring you on, because I've had these conversations with you.
Well, I think with respect to people feeling, there's an intimidation factor out there with running for office. It is an intimidation. It's putting your name out there, and elections are about choices, and I commend anyone who's willing to put their name on the ballot, because you're putting yourself and your family out there for people to scrutinize at any level. People, we are in a world of everybody can know a lot about people if they really try. And so putting yourself out there and running is important. And elections are about choices, and if we don't give people those choices, they're not going to get out and vote. And so I live in a district that is tough. But we had a great candidate run there last time, giving people a choice, working hard, and I don't know whether that person's going to run again, but as you do that, it's going to change minds, because people are going to wake up and say, there's a choice here. It's not just the same old, same old. And so in order to do that, we need people who are willing to get out there and run, and we need to be able to give them the resources from the state party, not always money, but a phone call back, training, advice, things that people can say, okay, I'm not doing this alone. That is a very important part for people to feel like they're part of something. That's a huge piece of building a party, in my opinion, and something we can always do better at, always do more of. It's a job that's never done.
It's never done.
It's never going to be done.
It's never done.
I'll retire from this job, not meaning I'm going to be in it forever, but when I'm done with this job, I'll still have not accomplished, and it will never be enough. And so you just have to do everything you can to build that party organization up and make people feel like they're part of something. And the people who are willing to run for office, them especially.
Yeah, and that was encouraging to me, and I know, and that's why another reason why I wanted to get out, because those encouraging words from the state party chair to me helped say, okay, I'm going to do this. When I'm out in Madison County or whatever county I'm in as the deputy chair, I say, let's just run. You know, we'll give you training. Speaking of training, May 6th, how exciting is it that we have over 150 people signed up for the state party's free training? I'm going to say this again. Free training, because I paid over $500 for training from Victory Institute, and I valued that training. It was it was a little different than what we received from the state. But May 6th, we are having a training down in Greenwood, and we're looking to do little trainings like that all over the state. How excited are you that people are even requesting that?
Oh, I'm very excited. I think we have a lot of new officers who were elected at the party. It's our county party summit is what we're calling it, and so it's an opportunity for our elected officers to the party and to come, and it's sort of a train the trainer. We want to give them the materials and the opportunity to go back and train their folks on the ground of precinct people. And so we've got a lot of people coming for that day to hear and participate in the training, and also to share best practices. We'll be doing a little bit of that too. So we've got some counties that are doing some really innovative things to bring people in and keep them involved in the party, and so we want to share those things and make sure people feel that it's not just the state party telling them how they need to do things, because we don't want to tell anyone everything. You know, we have 92 counties in the state, and they're all different, and so you never want to prescribe things and say this is how you have to do X,
right, because
Y,
Marion County is very different from Kosciuszko County.
So you look at here are some things you should consider as part of our training, and there are some things that you need to make sure you do these things to be an operating organization, but to not be prescriptive, but to share things and have a dialogue back and forth, and to use that opportunity for people to get to know one another.
Okay. And so, with all the energy from people wanting to get involved and all the different organizations that are still developing, tell me what roles, volunteer roles, that when people say, I don't know what to do, what can I do? Share with us what kind of roles are in the state party that if you're still trying to find something to do and you haven't talked to me yet, something wrong, but tell us what roles are available, because not everybody has the same ability.
Sure.
Right?
Well, I would encourage folks to, and we can help you do this, get involved at in your county party, because we're going to be a stronger state party if we have strong county parties. And so get involved, whatever county you're in. If you're listening from across the state or wherever, get involved with your county party. And in doing that, it's this year, there are so many issues at the State House in Washington to be mindful of. So you can write a letter to the editor. Okay. You can organize a letter writing party. You can talk with your county party about contacting voters in this non-election year and saying, just checking in. Yeah. We had a county who took volunteers out 3 weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon and knocked on doors and just doing a check-in with voters who had voted. And so all those kind of things.
I'm sorry, time out.
Yeah.
There's no election this year. You had a county take volunteers out and do some canvassing.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So volunteer work never ends.
No, it doesn't, and that's why you gotta want it. You gotta want to be involved. And again, and as you aptly pointed out, Dana, you got to figure out what you want to do and what keeps you active. Is it social media? Is it knocking doors? Is it making phone calls? Is it writing letters? Is it organizing one of those things? A house party for a candidate or someone who's thinking about running. Find what you like to do and do that.
And the state party will help you.
Yeah, and the very best thing we can do is say, here's what your county party's doing. Contact your county or your district chair and say, I want to get involved. Help me, because that's a ground up method of doing things, and they get involved on the ground, and they're helping their community.
Right.
Always, I live in a college town, and so we're always encouraging people to get involved in those local elections. Absolutely. Because it matters who picks up your trash. It matters who paves your streets. It matters. So many things locally matter, and so you've got to get. I think a strong believer in getting involved locally, and then I'm a big believer in the rising tide lifts all boats. And so if people are involved locally and write a letter to the editor, figure out what you like to do, and do that. I started after I got the hay wagon in that parade, I worked the door at just about every fundraiser that the summer of 1998 in Bloomington. Wow. And I was just available, and I wanted to get to know people, and so I sat at a table and handed people their name tags and got to know all these folks, and I was glad to do it. And that's just...
It's the little things.
It is, and just that's how I got involved, and just find an issue that drives you, find a candidate that drives you. Hopefully that's in the Democratic Party. And then what your activity is, that activity being knocking doors, making phone calls, research, doing something on social media, writing a letter, all those things. Just there are so many ways to do it, and to help a candidate, help them raise money. That's one of those things that none of us just relish in doing, but it's very necessary.
It is, so. and that is probably, for me, it was definitely the hardest part, because my philosophy says get money out of politics. It's not about the money. And that was a discussion I had recently about, the influence that money has. And it's very scary. But how can you pay your staff? How can you get data? How can you, listen, we are no longer in the hit on a choo-choo train and hit across, the country anymore, or across the state on a train. Everything is data-driven. Right. It takes money to analyze it. I work in IT. A business analyst is, for a for-profit organization, is going to start at $60,000 a year for an annual pay. Now, obviously, at a party level, we're not, talking about, but that is a skill that is a valued skill in the private sector.
Absolutely, and data. That's one of those.
It's data-driven. Yeah.
And an additional point there with data is we owe it to our donors and people who are invested in the party, both with time and money, to use data appropriately. Targeting and using data to doing the very best we can to keep that data secure
clean.
And solid and clean. That just helps anyone who wants to volunteer. If you're a volunteer that likes to make phone calls, the last thing you want to do is start calling through a bunch of numbers that are bad. So it's part of the state party's job to clean that up and make sure the numbers work, for instance, and data. And we do owe it to the folks who are our stakeholders, volunteers, donors, candidates, to make sure that we are efficient, and a big part of that is using data appropriately.
So even if you're not a door knocker, you're not someone who actually is really great at talking to people, there is a space for you in the party, because we need people to enter data. We need people to make sure the data is correct, and there's multiple ways to do that. So from what I'm hearing, there are a lot of ways for everybody who wants to be involved with the state party. There's things for you to do, and it's not just about an election year. We can do it in the off year.
And we should be doing it in the off year, and there's a lot of opportunity this year to do a lot of those things that are not front page of news, but just getting out there and getting involved, and there are lots of ways to do it. And people are energized, and they want to do stuff this year. Okay,
so you mentioned the front page of the paper. Session is supposed to end this week. I guess today is supposed to be a long day, Thursday, and then tomorrow ends session. I mentioned a bill or two that got my goat. What bills, not necessarily as the chair, but as a taxpaying citizen of the state of Indiana, what bills that you saw come through the House that piqued your interest, made you go, whoa, wait a second now?
Well, I think certainly one that comes to mind, as I mentioned earlier, is the issue of pre-K and early childhood education. That is something. It's estimated there are about 85,000 4-year-olds in Indiana, and our current pre-K program that the state sponsors serves about 2,300 of those kids. The current proposal is to have about $3 million a year, which would maybe double the number that's served. So you're getting a very small percentage of kids, and not every kid is in need of. Some kids are already in an early childhood program. I want to state that, but kids are for one time, just once. these are things you can't go back and
rewind.
And so if we're not doing it now, if we're not doing it as much as we can, I think it's just a shame that we have not invested more heavily in early childhood education in the state. Our previous governor, who's now the Vice President of the United States, was not convinced that early childhood education was effective. And I always say, I learned this during my time in the State House, was that 90% of a kid's brain is developed by the time they turn 4. And I can see it in my 2.5-year-old. I mean, it is just spinning 100 miles an hour in there, you know. And so if we're not doing stuff like that, you look at it, you just can't get those years back. And so that is something that drives my passion every day. I get up and think, boy, we've got to do better at that. Because you can't get those years back. Because when we talk about the economy and fairness, every opportunity we give a kid as early as possible is going to help them be more successful when they get to 3rd grade, when they get to 6th grade, when they get to 9th grade, and then when they get out in the workforce. They have better chances of doing better when we give them those opportunities and start that education as soon as possible, and it's so important.
So I imagine when the grant application that former Superintendent Linda Ritz painstakingly put together at the encouragement of the former governor, and then after it was all done and ready to submit, he didn't submit it. I imagine that probably had to It
was an absolute travesty for the state, and 80,000 children potentially lost out because he refused to take money. And from an ideological perspective, and this person is now the Vice President of the United States, who has their ideology now has more influence over the federal government, but to not want federal money to help 4-year-olds get pre-K was just an absolute travesty to me, and there's nothing I can say about it that is anything short of just what I just said. It's just it is,
I think you're doing good at containing all that, right?
In my opinion,
it was
because again, they're for one time. And you can't get those years back.
And the killer part is that it has such an impact on what happens after that. Right. So as they continue to work on Betsy DeVos's plan to completely gut and defund public education so that, those of us who, whose parents don't make as much money as other folks are not going to get the same quality education. The fact that we didn't even have early education means that we're going to create an economic divide because they're not going to have the skill levels. They're not even going to know how to get those skill levels if we're not teaching them at a young age the habits they need. Just like when you potty train. I mean, I know it sounds simplistic, but you set habits at a very young age, to go to the potty or to make up your bed. You set those habits at a young age, and when you don't create that space to set those positive habits, you have a generation, multiple generations of people, 85,000, where they're not going to be even prepared for 1st grade. And so we know we're not going to, if they're not ready for primary or secondary education, how are we going to get them ready for post-secondary education? And then it just creates a perpetual, second-class citizenry because people just didn't get the tools that they needed. So when I hear people talk about pulling people up by their bootstraps, people don't even know what a bootstrap is.
Well, you can't get those years back. Once you're 5, you're 5, and then you're 6. You're not 4 again. So it's just putting people behind if you're not starting them as early as possible.
See, you and I can talk an hour, and that hour went by so fast. Nobody
probably
didn't
see.
Because it's fun. Because it's all about positive energy, and there were some folks who still wanted to argue the Hillary Bernie thing, and I kept trying to say no, bring it back down to the state level, and let's stay positive. Because the bottom line is if you care about people and you care that quality education is available for every student in our state, if you care that women are paid the exact same for the same job, or if you care that, as workers you have the right to collective bargain, there's a place for you in our Democrat Party. I'm not saying that you're going to agree with everything, but there is a place for you. We are the Big Tent. I even had a discussion with an ultra-religious person, and he's on the right, and he said, there's no place for me in the Democrat Party. I said, but there is.
Yeah.
We want you to pray. We want you to pray as much as you want to pray, how often you want to pray, and we want to protect you when you're praying. Mm-hmm. So there is a place for everybody in our state party. Right. And it is incumbent upon us as leaders in the party, and I can almost say that about myself now, that we let people know that we are here and we are approachable. Thank you so very much for coming on and talking to us and sharing a little bit about your passion. If you didn't get to see, I'm telling you this, he's the truth. Listen, he's the kind of guy where you can reach out to the organization if you have a question. If he doesn't answer it, someone on his staff will. And if it doesn't happen, y'all need to call me and say, hey, so I can get John on the phone and say, John, we didn't get that answer. But the whole point is we want to engage, and having the chair of the state party demystifies, in my opinion, what that thing is, because we sometimes put people in places, they're just regular people.
Totally regular.
Just regular people. I had to tell a young lady the other day, when they dropped that bomb, I dropped a bomb on Facebook because it kind of ticked me off, and and I use some choice words, but I usually don't. I usually keep my Facebook page clean. And someone's like, Dana, I'm a little disappointed. I'm like, look, I'm a flawed human. I'm just don't set unrealistic expectations on me because I can give a decent speech, right? Don't set unrealistic expectations on our party chairs, our county chairs. They're regular people, and they're doing what they know how to do to help you. If you feel like something is not right, reach out to us. If you want to help, reach out to us. We are here. All I tell people all the time is look at the conventions. One convention is homogenous. The other one is Neapolitan. Look at the conventions. The state party is here. You have to remember, demographics are going to dictate when you're only, when the minority makeup is less than 20%, when you show up at places, it's going to reflect that. But that doesn't mean that those folks are not down for your causes. And that we talk about intersectionality in our Democratic Party. We don't, we care about women's issues like we care about immigrant issues. We care about all of those things. And there's a place for you. Bring your passion to the state party. John Zody, I'm a happy woman today, sir.
I'm a happy man. Thank you, Dana, very much for having me on.
Listen, check us out next week. I'll probably be ranting and raving about something silly that's been going on at the federal level. I've the last couple of shows we've had party chairs on, so I haven't really had a chance to talk about some of the policy changes. I guess the orange one is trying to reintroduce the health care debate again. The embarrassing loss wasn't enough, so they have to do it again. There's so much more information coming out about the Russia thing. I'm gonna have to talk about it, but also there's some state bills that are going to the governor's desk that we need to retouch on. I know that there's a few city addresses are going on, so maybe I'll be able to touch on some of those. But I'll be back next week, and we'll be talking about everything that's on the left side of things. Thank you, RadioNext.tv, for allowing us this platform. If you guys have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me directly, or you can go to www.indem.org for Indiana Democrat Party. They're also on Twitter and Facebook. We're always available. There's a staff there to answer your questions. If you have concerns or you feel like you're being neglected, let us know, because we want to fix it. We can't fix it if you don't tell us. We can't solve a problem if you don't tell us. And I saw something, and listen, I roll my sleeves up and I get to work. So thank you, everybody, for joining in. John Zody, thank you very much for your time. You're a busy man. Next week, turn left, right here, same bat time, same bat station. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys later.